I'm ready. Today I am doing a video a little bit different than the usual videos I do. Usually I do studio vlogs and I kind of just have you about with me while I'm doing my stuff for my Etsy shop, which by the way is really slow at the moment. So yeah, this is just something a little bit different. Um, and it's come off the back of me being in a lot of Etsy groups on Facebook. I'm not the kind of person that really keeps up to date with what's going on with Etsy as much as I probably should. I'm not in the forums. I'm not necessarily like checking all their blog posts and that kind of things. But if there is something that has changed on Etsy, I will know about it in those Facebook groups within about 5 minutes. So they have been an invaluable source of information for me. Um, over the years. Like I've been on Etsy since like 2016. Um, if you don't know my background, I've been on Etsy since 2016. I ran a fairly successful wedding stationery shop until 2020. And then the old Panny D came along and put the kibosh on weddings, which meant that I didn't have any work for a really long time. Plus, schools were closed and I had to homeschool my kids, so I couldn't do both. So I basically took a really long break until kind of late last year. So that's late 2022. And now I'm back on Etsy. Loads of things have changed. It's not quite the same as it used to be. But there are some things that I still think are like really good, and I still really like being on Etsy. I think it's a really good marketplace to be on. But one of the things that has changed massively is the introduction of an Etsy reserve. Now, if you don't know what an Etsy reserve is, it is where Etsy hold back 75% of your funds so that it's supposed to be a safety feature. So it's so that if there's a problem and the customer needs their money back, the money is still there to be given back to the customer. It's supposed to be a safety feature, like I say, but a lot of people are not very happy about not getting their money as quickly as they used to be. Honestly, with Etsy, I do feel like we are and have been a little bit spoiled in the fact that you do, or once you're out of reserve, at least you get your money really quickly. Other platforms like Amazon Handmade, I know people often have to wait a really long time for their money to come through. So I do feel like we've been a bit spoiled by Etsy with that. And this change is kind of more reflective of some other marketplaces, but it is such a massive change for people who are not used to it. So what is an Etsy reserve? Let's get into that first. It basically means that Etsy will hold back 75% of each sale. So for a period of 90 days, each sale that comes in has 75% of the funds held back within Etsy. You can't access it. You get the 25%. And that happens for every order that comes in for a period of 90 days. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is each individual order that comes in is subject to a 45-day waiting period. So after 45 days that the order was placed, if there's been no complaints, then the money gets released. So these are like two separate timeframes. For a period of 90 days, that means you're in reserve for 90 days, and that every order that comes in that period is subject to the reserve. But you also have a 45-day period, which applies to each individual order. So if you are on your 89th day of being on reserve, let's say you've got one more day left. If you're on your 89th day of being in reserve and you're due to come out of reserve tomorrow, but you get an order on that day. So it turns out what I was going to say here is actually completely wrong. I was going to say that if you're on day 89 of your reserve and you get a sale, you still have to wait 45 days for that money to be released, but it's not true. If you are on day 89 of your reserve and you get a sale, when it comes to day 90, all the money that is held in your reserve will be released. So you don't have to wait that 45-day period once your reserve ends. When you come out of reserve after 90 days, you are out of reserve completely. So we can just skip to the next part of the video because everything I'm about to say was completely wrong. It feels really complicated, and Etsy are not explaining this well. So I mean, I don't even know if I've understood it fully, but that's from what I gather is what's happening. There is one way to get your money faster, which is to add tracking to your postage, which then means that Etsy can see that your order has been delivered, and then they go, okay, you're not a scammer. The customer's received their item. You can have your money now. So there is kind of a way round it. But it's supposed to be a safety feature as much as it's a pain in the backside for people who are selling and they, just want to sell their stuff and they need to buy materials and postage and all that kind of thing. It's supposed to be a safety feature for the customer. It's supposed to be there so that people don't come onto Etsy and start selling stuff that they haven't got and then just go, okay, I'm going to keep the money and not send anything. It's there to benefit the marketplace as a whole. Although for the individual, it's a pain in the backside, for the marketplace as a whole, it's a really good thing because it builds more trust with the customer and it stops people who are scammy from being in the marketplace, which means that if the whole marketplace is more trustworthy, you as an individual seller are then more trustworthy by association. We don't want all these scammy people coming into Etsy, dragging down Etsy's reputation. We have enough of that already with drop shippers and people who are claiming to sell handmade that isn't handmade and that kind of thing. We have enough of that already. So I actually think that the reserve process is a good thing because if you can go through the reserve process and come out the other side, then you've kind of placed yourself as a more serious, more trustworthy seller that Etsy can rely on, and therefore customers can rely on. And therefore, if customers know they can rely on you, or that they can rely on Etsy as a marketplace, they're more likely to shop there. It's a win for everyone. Now, I know I just said that it's to stop new sellers coming in and being scammy and stuff. And there will be people watching this that are like, I've been on Etsy for a really long time. Why did I get put in reserve? I've been on Etsy for a really long time and I got put in reserve. So I don't think that this is something just for new sellers. I think everybody is going to go through this process. And I do just think it's something we have to just learn to navigate and work with. And there are people saying that lots of different things can trigger a reserve, such as changing your bank details, changing your address, not sending stuff tracked, having a complaint, having a low star review, not sending stuff on time. Like there are all these factors, and I don't know how much of them have come directly from Etsy and how much of it is kind of speculation. But I do just think it's something everybody's going to have to go through at some point. And if we know it's coming and we can prepare for it, or at least are aware that it's going to happen, then it's not such a shock to the system and we might not feel quite so bad about it. I've had 2 shops go through the reserve process. My original shop that I used for my wedding stuff, I kind of just left that shop alone and hadn't used it. And I reopened a new shop in October last year. But I actually decided to rebrand and go back to my old name. Therefore, I had to go back to my old shop. So my new shop went on into the reserve process, and then my old shop also did the same. And I've come out the other side for both of them. I wouldn't say I had tons of orders in that time, but it did give me an opportunity to see how the reserve works, how it works differently for different types of businesses as well, because I've actually changed the products that I've been selling over that time. So that comes into play a little bit as well. But there might not be a reason that you get put on reserve. You might just be like, I'm on reserve for no apparent reason. And that is literally it. Like, there doesn't have to be a reason. Etsy can put you in reserve if they think that they want to. And that's kind of all there is to it. So, yeah, there might not be a reason. It might not mean you did something to trigger a reserve. It might just be your turn. But yeah, I think this is coming for everybody at some point. So I kind of think we have to get used to it. If you've been put in a reserve and you're like, how the heck do I get out of this as fast as possible? There are a couple of ways to get out of reserve. One is to become a star seller. As far as I can tell, once you reach star seller status, you then become are not in reserve anymore. They will take you out early if you can reach star seller status. And again, like, this is just another thing that is meant to be a safety feature for the customer, to build trust, so that people learn that when they come to Etsy and they see that little star seller badge, okay, this person's legit. This is what Etsy are trying to do. They're trying to legitimize their marketplace because it's become kind of full of crap, honestly. And I think this is what Etsy are trying to do. They're trying to legitimize their marketplace and make it more trustworthy for the customer. And I think that's what the star seller program is also designed to do. So if you become a star seller before you get out of reserve, they, as far as I'm aware, will take you out of reserve early. Otherwise, you just have to wait it out. Because I know there are going to be some people watching this going, but I'm not eligible for star seller because I don't send tracked and da. We're getting there. We'll get to that bit. But yeah, wait it out or become a star seller seem to be the only ways to get out of reserve early. No amount of sending Etsy messages and emails is going to make them turn around and go, oh, okay, then we'll just take you out of the reserve. Like, it's not going to happen. So you either wait it out or you become a star seller. Those are really the only two options. So I know there are some people that are going to be like, I can't get star seller. There are a couple of reasons why you might not be able to get star seller. One of them that I've seen crop up loads is that you've got all the right statistics for star seller, but your orders just says pending and it won't change even though you've got more than the minimum amount of orders. It just doesn't change. That is because most likely you are a new shop and you have to wait 90 days from your first sale to be eligible for star seller. I had this on one of my shops that I had sold enough. I met the minimum threshold for sales for the monetary amount that they put on it, 5-star reviews, messages, all that stuff, but it just said pending. And it was because I had to wait 90 days from my first sale to be eligible for star seller. So that might be a reason why you should be a star seller, but you're not yet. And in that case, you just have to wait it out. Again, it's so that Etsy can verify that you're a legit person. I'm fairly certain everything Etsy is doing is just to legitimize the marketplace and just build trust with the customers. So in that case, you're just going to have to wait it out. The other reason a lot of people seem to not be able to meet the star seller is because they can't, for whatever reason, send their items tracked. Now, this is something I've come across in my newer shop, or my old new shop, if you were listening to the other part. The shop I'm selling in now, it's something I've come across there because I'm not going to send stuff tracked because it's really flipping expensive. So what you can do instead is to buy the standard, and this only really applies for UK, buy the standard Royal Mail. Actually, I'm saying this only applies for UK. The same principle applies in the US, but you don't have Royal Mail there. So that's what I meant when I said this only applies for UK. If you buy the Royal Mail standard post service, not the tracked, not the track and signed, but just the standard post service through Etsy labels, it gives you a tracking number. And Etsy can verify that your item has been delivered if you do that. The one exception to that is if you use the standard letter size. So if you are a greeting card seller like me and you usually sell stuff and it goes off as standard post, but it's letter sized, to upgrade that to tracked is quite a lot more expensive. The workaround for that is to upgrade it to a large letter. So this whole thing with Etsy labels, you can buy standard Royal Mail post in anything size large letter and up, and it will count as tracked. You do not have to use an actual tracked service if you use Etsy labels. It just has to be traceable. Now, letters aren't, large letters are, parcels are. So if you are one of these people that's like, I can't up my price to tracked postage, it's not worth it, especially because Etsy incentivize us to do free postage, which we all know isn't really free because you have to put that cost in somewhere. But yeah, if you are thinking I can't justify the price of the tracked for a low value item, then the way around that is to send it as a large letter through Etsy labels, or large letter or bigger. If it's a parcel, the same principle applies. But if you do it through Etsy labels, you get a tracking, it's not actually a tracking number, but it's a delivery confirmation number. And then what that means is you are eligible for Star Seller for a start, but it also means if you are in reserve, Etsy can verify that that order has been delivered. Therefore, the funds for that particular order should be released early. I did this on all my orders from one of my shops, and every single thing got updated, bar one thing that for some reason was stuck in pre-transit. I'm pretty sure that if that happens, you can send Etsy an email and they will look into it and update the shipping if necessary, because they can look into it like from their end manually, because sometimes it doesn't automatically update. But that is the way that I didn't get out of reserve by doing that. I was still in reserve because I wasn't eligible for Star Seller, because I was too new of a shop. But what it did mean is that my funds were being released in sort of dribs and drabs earlier than the 45-day wait. So there is a way to navigate this if you know how, and Etsy are not making it easy to understand. Another question that I've seen asked is that I've waited 45 days and I'm still in reserve. Like, why? Because the reserve is on your account for 90 days. So the reserve period is 90 days. The 45-day thing is for each individual order. So if you have one order that comes in and you don't use a traceable or a tracked shipping option, after 45 days, the money from that one sale, remember it's only 75%, it's not actually the whole sale, but the 75% from that sale will become available to you. It's not a 45-day reserve, it's a 90-day reserve period for each order. I just whacked my microphone, I hope you didn't hear that. Each order is subject to a 45-day waiting period, unless you can do the tracking posts that we talked about a minute ago. And the last thing that I keep saying that is really, really confusing people is the reserve minimum. So if you have been put on reserve, once you get an order through, you will see that there's a note on it that says your reserve minimum is X amount, which is basically 75% of all the open orders that you've got. So hang on, let me try to do maths. This is going to be difficult. So if you have an order for £10, let's say, £7.50 of that will go in your reserve, and then £2.50 of that will go in your available funds pot, right? So your reserve minimum needs to cover 75% of all the open orders that you have. So I realised everything I was about to say here was really complicated, and I explained it in such a way that it didn't make actually a lot of sense. So I have gone back and I'm going to re-explain it again, hopefully in a way that makes more sense about how the Etsy reserve minimum actually works. So what happens with your Etsy reserve minimum is this: you make a sale, Etsy take away the fees from that sale straight away. Then what they do is they put 75% of that sale into the Etsy reserve and 25% of that sale into the available funds. They always take 75% of the whole sale amount, but you don't always get 25% of your available funds because they have already taken away the fees. Then what happens is if you try to buy an Etsy label or you have listing fees or renewal fees to pay, they try and take them from your available funds first, and then if there is not enough cash in the available funds to cover it, they will take it from the Etsy reserve, and this is what affects your reserve minimum amount. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this is probably attempt 5 of me recording this part of the video because my microphone decided not to work on me. Anyway, let's have a look at this Etsy reserve minimum in terms of some real numbers. Now let's say you make a sale of £10 and it is the only open order that you have got. Following the diagram from the top, you make a sale of £10. Then we go down and Etsy takes away fees amounting to £2.45. That's what you'll pay in fees on a £10 sale. The next thing Etsy wants to do is split that money. And what they do first is put 75% of your sale into the Etsy reserve. So that equates to £7.50 in your Etsy reserve. Your Etsy reserve minimum should be £7.50 because you have, this is your only open order. So you have one open order of £10, and Etsy wants you to cover 75% of all your open orders in the Etsy reserve, which is what your reserve minimum is. So because you've only got this one open order, your reserve minimum is £7.50. Now, if we look on the left-hand side, what they're then going to try and do is put your 25% into available funds. Now, you can see from this, there's only 5p going in there. Well, that doesn't seem right, does it? Because there should be £2.50 going in there. But you have to remember, Etsy takes away the fees straight away. So, of your £2.50, they've already taken out £2.45, which is gone. You already owed Etsy that money. Even if they'd paid you the full £2.50, you would have had to have paid £2.45 to them in fees. So to save money going backwards and forwards, they just take the fees straight away. I know it sucks because out of a £10 sale, it looks like you're only getting 5p, but you will get your £7.50 eventually. Now, let's say you have to ship this order that comes to £10 and you're going to use an Etsy label that costs you £1.95. What's going to happen is Etsy will try and pay for that label out of your available funds. If you have enough in there, happy days. But in this case, there's only 5p in the available funds. So Etsy's going to pay for the Etsy label with that 5p, but you still owe £1.90. And that £1.90 is going to come out of your Etsy reserve. Doesn't sound like a problem, except for the fact that your reserve minimum still needs to be £7.50. So if they're going to pay £1.90 out of your Etsy reserve, you're going to be left with £5.60, but you're still going to have a reserve minimum of £7.50. And they're going to tell you you are below your reserve minimum by £1.90. Now, this seems easy to follow when you are looking at one sale of £10. It's easy to work out the numbers. It's easy to see the chain of events that happens here. But when you have orders coming in and out, that's where it makes it more difficult to follow. This is really complicated, and I don't know if Etsy made it complicated on purpose so that we don't understand what's going on or what, but it's just causing a lot of confusion. And you can always look at your payment account breakdown, like all the numbers are there. But yeah, it is a very confusing thing. But that reserve minimum really threw me off because it was like just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, why is that? But it's because it has to cover 75% of all of your open orders. And it might not do, because there might not be, if you've bought a lot of labels or whatever, it seems like there's not always enough money to go into the reserve. Like I say, I don't necessarily think this reserve process is a bad thing. I know loads of people are struggling with it. I think we just have to figure out how to navigate it. It does mean that it causes a cash flow issue for sure. I'm not going to debate that it doesn't. But it shouldn't cause you a profit issue. That's the thing. Like you're always still going to get all of the money that you're owed, just not necessarily in the time frame that you might have expected. But if the Etsy reserve means you are actually losing money, it's because you were losing money anyway. It's now just more apparent to you. Like, you should still make a profit even if you're in an Etsy reserve. And I don't mean obviously in the first week or whatever. By the time you come out of the reserve, all your outgoings and incomings and whatever should all balance out. So you're always going to get all of the money that you're owed. It's just not all in one go, which, like I said, it causes a cash flow issue because yes, you might not have as much money as you expected to buy materials or to buy postage labels. And again, the way I'm getting around the postage label thing is to buy everything through Etsy labels, and then I don't have to pay it out of my actual cash. It comes out of all the funds that are in Etsy somehow. I'm not exactly sure how that's happening, but for me, it's working. So yeah, again, it's just another way for Etsy to encourage us to use their labels, because one, it builds more trust because they can, for the most part, they can trace them and they can track them, even if you don't buy a tracked service. Um, so it builds trust. Also, let's be honest, Etsy want to make a little bit more money, so they want us buying labels through them. Fair enough. But if it makes things easier for me, I'm going to do it, because it's just business at the end of the day. I'm not, I know Etsy aren't personally out to victimize me. They're a business. I'm a business. We're both here to make money at the end of the day. Even if we're making money doing things that we love, we're still businesses, and we have to think like businesses sometimes, which is really hard when you are like a person on your own, and like your business is your baby and you've built this thing from the ground and you just want to like take care of it. um but yeah, I don't think Etsy's like personally out to get me. It's just the way that it is, and we can either learn to navigate it or not. I guess those are the options, like learn to navigate it or leave, essentially. But I don't want to leave Etsy because I think it's a really good platform. um I've had really good success on it in the past. I'm still kind of working things out and rebuilding a bit since I left and came back, because a lot of stuff has changed. um but yeah, on the whole, I'm still enjoying my time here. Etsy reserves are a bit of a pain in the backside, but I think we can make it through. I hope this was helpful. I will say I'm not obviously an expert in this. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I kind of just wanted to get across the information that I do feel like I understand, and let you know, I guess, what my experience of it has been. Um, but feel free to leave a comment if you have a question or something you're not sure of. If I know the answer, I will obviously let you know. I'm not gatekeeping Etsy information here. Um, but yeah, hope it was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Have a good day, pals. Bye bye.